I have a question for you. Have you learned anything? Our quarantine has come to the end, almost coming to an end. Have we learned anything? I don't know. I guess that's for you to determine. Have we learned anything? I see people saying things and I don't think they've learned anything. For instance, I saw one priest who was making a video and talking about how basically that any obeying of the governmental authorities was obeying governmental persecution, and it was showing a lack of faith and everything else. And he buttressed this by saying they even lie about it being a pandemic, because he knows his Greek. He knows that pandemic means all, basically. I don't know my Greek very well, but basically he said something like it means all the people. So it's not all the people, so it must not be a pandemic. Well, the dude is clearly not medical. Okay? I trained as a nurse. I'm telling you, this is a pandemic. A pandemic never affects all of the people. It means it's widespread, extremely widespread. When we say things like that, we just look stupid. And the idea that obeying the governmental authorities and obeying our bishop is somehow something that is showing our lack of faith, it's actually the exact opposite. Now, if the government ever persecutes us, then that's a different thing. Are they persecuting us? They're doing the best they can. Now, many of these people are highly secular, and they're anti-religious, and they're all in for killing babies. So, of course, you gotta think that they're going to be making mistakes. So that's happening, absolutely. Many of the people making these decisions are not spiritual people at all. So they're only secular people. But we still are in secular society, and we still should obey. Let me show you something that I thought was very good. It's from a bishop who recently recovered from coronavirus in Russia. Bishop Peter Heers of Zvenogrod, the rector of, sorry about how I pronounce that, the rector of Moscow Theological Academy. And he said this: we can already begin to draw initial conclusions about the corona horror that has befallen us. The most important conclusion concerns the role of hierarchy in crisis situations. In times of cataclysm, the Lord admonishes people through powers and principalities. No priests, no elders, no elderesses, even if they be grace-filled, clairvoyant, etc., and even if they have multiple YouTube videos, I put that part in, can fully know what to do right in times of social disaster and turmoil. The correct actions are determined by His Holiness the Patriarch, followed by the bishops. Secular authorities may also receive guidance from God about what needs to be done in particular situations. But when people stop listening to spiritual and secular authorities, even if guided by the best of intentions, they open the road to hell. I completely agree with His Grace here. This idea that we are being disobedient because we're being persecuted by the secular authorities is just crazy. If you think this is persecution, then I don't think you're ready for persecution. This very punishment came about due to an ingrained habit. He's talking about the punishment of being quarantined and such, and missing Pascha and such like that, at least missing Pascha in the church. I hope you didn't miss Pascha. Is due to an ingrained habit we've developed of scorning the authorities. And it won't abate if we continue to criticize our leaders, even for honest mistakes they might inevitably make under the circumstances. One needs to have understanding and patience and humility, and most importantly, repentance. And then he says some things that I've been thinking and trying to say, although not so eloquently, for a while. We, friends, have lately become rather presumptuous, forgetting about the living God and replacing Him with frequent communion, pleasant holidays and fasts, all manner of ceremonies, cross processions, pilgrimages. All these things, of course, are wonderful, but what is the goal? The goal is our salvation. So the Lord has turned us toward that one goal for which we should strive. I, for one, do not believe at all that it is a lack of faith that is the reason why Christians are obeying the secular authorities. It's not me. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I'm obedient to my bishop. I'm obedient to my secular authorities. And they're not persecuting me. Don't agree with everything they've done, but they're not persecuting me. There might come a time when they do persecute. then there will be civil disobedience, as there has been in the history of the church. But this is not persecution. We are just disagreeing with maybe the way they're doing things. And you know, everybody's got opinions. I wanted to say one other thing about this. There's somebody who did a video, very popular priest. I respect some of the things he's done. I don't respect this. This idea that there are people, hideous secular people, such as Cuomo. Yeah, he is. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. He's extremely secular. He's a completely non-religious, abortion-loving, supposed Roman Catholic. He's not religious. He's secular. And he's made secular statements. And he basically is talking about non-essential people, and he considers religious people to be non-essential. And so there's this idea among very secular people that religious people are non-essential. And somehow we're offended about this? Huh? Isn't this always the way it's been? I would submit to you that among our own people, many of them consider priests and bishops to be non-essential. Because otherwise, why would they come for Pascha, light their candle, walk around the building 3 times, and leave? Why would they only commune very infrequently? Why would they not respect their bishops and their priests? They consider their bishops and priests to be basically non-essential. And so we're judged for that. And so secular society considers much religion to be non-essential. So what? It's always been that way. There is one big difference between us, this time, this epoch, and the time during the Roman Empire when Christians were multiplying. There's a big difference. Now, obviously, there's all kinds of things that you can talk about that are different, but this is startling. We are in a society now where people are calling themselves Christians and doing pagan and terrible and sinful things and justifying them as correct and good. So they're actually a kind of a neo-pagan lifestyle. Can you imagine Christians that are pro-choice? This is insane. Christians that are pro-homosexual. Christians that are just have all these terrible ideas. This is a kind of a false Christianity. And the society, of course, reflects much of that, is much of that. So the Christians hardly look any different than these people. In ancient Rome, the Christians were leaving immoral lifestyles, and they really looked different than ancient Rome. Ancient Rome didn't like them for that, and they were persecuted many times because of that. But now our Christians sometimes, or our supposed Christians, Christians in name, they actually persecute others that are Christian because it's kind of thine I evil because I am good. So if we want to talk about non-essential and how some people consider priests and bishops and services non-essential, our own people often consider these things non-essential. Let's be real and let's be honest. You should make sure that you are not among those people. During this quarantine period, even more so than before the quarantine period, you should be observing the day on both the eve and on the day itself. Perhaps, like most Orthodox Christians, to be honest with you, you don't observe the day and the eve. Well, that's a terrible sin, and you should correct that. And perhaps you don't always observe the day because, well, you got this to do, you got that to do, whatever. Well, now that it's taken away from you, maybe you've noticed that it's a lot more precious than you thought. So don't wait for the quarantine to end and say, then we can go back to church. You should be praying now, very much, increasing your prayer, and certainly observing the day in the eve and on the day itself. So on Saturday and Sunday. So are we irrelevant? We're irrelevant if we allow ourselves to be irrelevant. Society is always going to, secular society has always considered us irrelevant. I'm sad about the Orthodox Christians that consider Christianity to be basically irrelevant. It always hurts my heart when I see a person whose their politics defines their Christianity. That's a terrible sin. We are Christians. We are to pray. For now, I'm obeying the secular authorities. If they start to persecute worship so that I cannot bring the mysteries to my flock, so that I cannot bring unction to my flock, etc., on an everlasting basis, then I'm going to disobey the secular authorities. This is not the time. One of the major reasons why I'm obeying the secular authorities, besides, of course, that I obey my bishop, and I trust my bishop and I love my bishop. But the reason why I'm doing it, secondarily to that, is what St. Paul said about eating meat sacrificed to idols. I personally think that we can do some things that are not increasing the danger, or at least at a manageable risk. And you may or not agree with me. Doesn't really matter for the purposes of this illustration. I think we can do some things. And other people don't. And especially secular authorities and secular people are freaking out about gatherings in church and such. So I should obey the secular authorities so that I don't scandalize my brother. St. Paul said, I could eat meat sacrificed to idols, but what if somebody, their conscience is seared by that? Then I should not eat that meat. It's not a sin for me to eat that meat, but it's a sin for me to cause scandals to someone else. And people that are making all these protests and that are gathering in church in disobedience to directives, etc., and are fomenting this idea that if you obey the secular authorities, somehow you're not really a real Christian, that's a sin. That's a sin. I'm not going to commit that sin. I have enough sins that I don't want to commit that sin as well. May God bless you. We are very relevant if we are Christian. It doesn't matter what other people say about us. It doesn't even matter what other people who call themselves Orthodox Christians say about us if they're not really faithful. It matters that you are faithful. Christ is risen. Truly he is risen.